Good morning to baristas. Well, the latest tack of the libertarian GOP axis is to demonize the word progressive, and those labeling themselves as such. Just as the vilified liberals and liberalism, except when it's defined as free market economics, and anathematized socialism and socialists, now they're out to slay the last semantic shield of the socially conscious side of the human spectrum. And even use of the word socialist considered suspect. This is essentially a theological crusade, and in turning progressives into witches to be burned, their inquisition totes out for evidence the record of the progressive movement at the turn of the last century. And progressives were, we're told, racist, eugenicists, believers in imperialist expansion, and corporate elitists. Well, the problem is, so was everyone else at the time. To conflate these attitudes only with the progressive movement is a totally ignorant or completely dishonest attempt, take your pick, to schematize the past to fit reactionary needs of the present. As Thurman Arnold said in The Folklore of Capitalism on the Lessons of History, men do not actually search history to avoid the mistakes of the past. They seek convenient analogies to show the dangers in failing to adopt the creed which they advocate. Presented to me as a major exhibit of material evidence for this indictment of progressives was the wartime rounding up and incarceration of Japanese Americans in California after Pearl Harbor. Without doubt, this was a racist knee-jerk reaction, and rightly judged as such by history, whipped up by war hysteria, justified at the time by military necessity in removing fifth-column elements who might owe allegiance to an enemy state and seek to aid and comfort their old homeland over the new one. Because Franklin D. Roosevelt, the progressive Democratic president, and his progressive New Deal cabinet were in power, this racial profiling and resulting mass incarceration is offered as proof of the evil of progressive statism in general. Only, as you might guess, the reality wasn't as simple and convenient as the Libertarian Inquisition wants it to be in service to their agenda. FDR's Executive Order 9066 was drafted based on the recommendation of the U.S. War Department, as it was then more honestly known, based in turn on the assessment of General John DeWitt, commander of the Western Defense Area. DeWitt's anti-Japanese feelings stemmed from his service in the Philippines, not progressive politics. The War Department's recommendation was acquiesced to by the Justice Department, and all it needed was the President's signature. Roosevelt, unlike a real racist, was aware of the implications of this order and stressed that said removal was for military necessity only, and also offered this warning. Remember the Nazi technique. Pit race against race, religion against religion, prejudice against prejudice. Divide and conquer. We must not let that happen here. We must not forget what we are defending: liberty, decency, justice. Attorney General Biddle also counseled respect for the rights of all persons of Japanese ancestry. So what went wrong? Why did Executive Order 9066 become in practice the worst racist order since the forced removal of American Indians by Andrew Jackson? Well, 3 days after the order, the Subcommittee on National Defense met under chairmanship of a California Congressman, John Tolan. An Oakland attorney testified before the Tolan Committee and declared, "I find no popular demand for the efforts to drive the so-called alien enemies from California. The clamor seems to come from the Chamber of Commerce, the Associated Farmers of California, and the newspapers as spokesmen for reactionary interests. Efforts should thus be made to determine any connection between the clamor for the dispossession of Japanese farmers and the desire to get possession of Japanese farms and the elimination of Japanese competition." So far, the Attorney General has resisted the mad pressure. And the attorney went on to note these same types were also clamoring for martial law in California, which, he said, would abolish the rights of all of us and make many wonder whether totalitarianism is to be fought with the same and to reduce the struggle to an abstraction. And so who were these types? Progressives, liberals, statists, out to destroy the rights of free men just because they can? The California Chamber of Commerce and the Associated Farmers were certainly not dominated by liberals, progressives, and statists in that sense, but anti-New Deal, anti-progressive interests out to make individual profit from a war measure which these vested private interests led the way in pushing for their own profit. Typical of their paid-for mouthpieces in the press was Westbrook Pegler, the Rush Limbaugh of the period, who wrote, let me gag first, "The Japanese in California should be under guard to the last man and woman right now, and to hell with habeas corpus until the danger is over." Henry McLemore, a columnist for the Hearst newspapers, wrote in the Los Angeles Times, "Let us have no patience with the enemy or anyone whose veins carry his blood. Personally, I hate the Japanese, and that goes for all of them. Everywhere that the Japanese have attacked to date, the Japanese population has risen to aid the attackers. I am for the immediate removal of every Japanese on the West Coast in a point deep in the interior. Herd them up, pack them off, and give them the inside room in the Badlands. Let them be pinched, hurt, hungry, and dead up against it. if making 1 million innocent Japanese uncomfortable would prevent one scheming Japanese from costing the life of an American boy, then let 1 million innocents suffer. The Los Angeles Times, in which that column appeared, was generally noted for its hatred of the progressive movement and the New Deal, and noted on its own editorial page, "A viper is nonetheless a viper wherever the egg is hatched. So a Japanese American nurtured upon Japanese traditions in a Japanese atmosphere and inoculated in Japanese thoughts and ideals will be an active danger to our country, notwithstanding his nominal citizenship, unless properly supervised, controlled, and, as it were, hamstrung." Sounds like Tea Party folk telling us what to do with ragheads and Muslims, doesn't it? But it's only racism when done under presidential administrations libertarians don't like. Otherwise, it's genuine patriotic military necessity, unlike false progressive military necessity. Anyway, to show his fairness, General DeWitt insisted the order should be applied to all other Axis nationals on the West Coast, including Germans and Italians. This even included the father of Joe DiMaggio, living in Oakland, who'd emigrated to the U.S. long before Mussolini or the Axis, but had never taken out U.S.A. citizenship. When asked if an exemption couldn't be made for the elder DiMaggio, DeWitt said, "Yes, he's got to go, and no, you can't make a single exception. If you do that, you're lost." But in the end, these other Axis nationals, Italians in particular, were left alone because to incarcerate Italian growers in California would be detrimental to agricultural production. Italian-American farmers were among those who took over vacated Japanese properties, not because they were New Deal progressives, but assimilated American businessmen using war hysteria and social prejudice for their own advantage in the free market like all the rest around them. So, the real story of Japanese-American incarceration is one that lays blame on all sectors of American society, and its worst features did not originate from FDR's progressive, liberal, New Deal Washington, but from local government and private interests. Of course, the incarceration of Japanese-Americans was mild compared to German or Russian practice at the time, but twice as bad when committed by the world champion of freedom fighting to make the world safe for liberty, decency, and justice. So Executive Order 9066 doesn't truly fill the war bill for libertarians. I could offer another example of military history that disproves their war state theory, the debacle of the Confederate States of America. But let me choose another example from World War II, one that works in their favor, but one they won't have the courage to pursue. What foiled Adolf Hitler's Holocaust was the very statelessness of the Jew. Because Jews were scattered in local communities and country after country, Hitler was forced to order massive concentrations of them with all the expense of mass transportation logistics and centralized domicile and killing technology. This massive state expenditure diverted the Reich war effort and played a role in fatally draining and weakening the Nazi state in its last months. Because of the stateless Jewish diaspora, Hitler could exterminate Jews only as far as his armies and bureaucratic state apparatus could reach. And since it couldn't reach the Western Hemisphere, the interior of the Soviet Union, or the Middle East, his state-planned Holocaust could never be completed. Unfortunately, the Jews have abandoned the horizontal conception of nationhood that saved them in World War II for the vertical hierarchy of a nation-state, namely Israel. Now, Jews have done by themselves what it took Hitler so much effort and expense to accomplish: concentrate themselves in one spot so that they're a sitting target for any new Holocaust launched according to rules of engagement in interstate warfare or by nuclear warhead. If libertarians were truly concerned in opposing anti-Semitism and genocide, they would use their political insights to counsel Jews that the state of Israel is not a good thing, but to keep the stateless forms of national community that serve them so well. But it seems they shy away from the lessons of history just as conveniently as any Zionist state progressive. Uh-oh. I should have known that was coming on the YouTube line. Hello. David Ben-Gurion, founding father of the State of Israel. I stirred up the spirits today. We just wanted to say that you sympathize completely with what old FDR was up against, having enemy nationals in the bosom of your country. That sometimes you have to be cruel in the present to be kind in the future. Well, at least FDR let his captives go, and the U.S. government has officially apologized and made restitution and such. That was his mistake, letting them stay instead of deporting them all. That was because he knew there would be libertarians with the courage to say nasty things about him 70 years later when everyone involved was dead. Dave, you know they'd never have the guts to stand up to you.